Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. It is Thursday, Vince. It's also March 17th, Vince, which means it's St. Patrick's Day, which for a guy that's like Italian and Puerto Rican and a couple other things may not mean a whole lot to you, baby, but for us Irish people, this is kind of a big
I'm
day.
Irish too. I'm Irish too.
That's
I'm a mutt.
one of your 50%.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm a mutt.
Okay, you got
I'm
that
Irish
in there.
Too. Yeah.
But of course, we're all Notre Dame fans. So St.
Of
Patty's
course.
Day is going to be a fun day. This is a super active Notre Dame St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
Obviously, Notre Dame doesn't win their basketball game last night until after midnight, so it's on St. Patrick's Day.
Right.
Notre Dame opened spring practice today. The pots of gold went out today. Tons going on, and we're going to talk about all of the football-related things. I'm not going to talk about the basketball game. I'm sorry.
You don't want to hear what I have to say about that.
We're football. It was a fun game, and
It
it was great, and now it's time to talk about football.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to start with spring practice, and then Vince and I are going to talk about spring practice, and then I'm going to bring Ryan Roberts on, and we're going to talk about just the pots of gold. Notre Dame has offered a ton of 2024 kids today as part of the pot of gold search. We saw this a year ago. There's more to come. They're going to be offering kids. It's like waves. They're doing it like in waves.
Interesting.
There's going to be close to 100 kids that are going to get stuff from Notre Dame today, and very strategic. And we're going to talk about what it means and how it impacts recruiting. And it was super impactful last year. I remember we talked about it last year, Vince, and we did like a whole show on it, just like a show on that. And if you look at a lot of the guys, Dante Moore, that was when Dante Moore got his offer, was on the pot of gold day on St. Patrick's Day, a year later. Now look where they are. Keon Keeley was tweeting about when he got his pot of gold last year and how fired up he was. And, it's a really cool deal. And I love what Notre Dame's doing with it. So we'll talk about that as well. And then of course, at the end, we'll have our Q&A. So it's a new format. If you all have questions you want us to ask during this portion of the show, super chat it, right? And then we'll bring it up during this part of the show. But after that, it's just throw your questions in now for things you want us to discuss during the Q&A portion.
Right.
And we will get to it. So
absolutely,
definitely throw that. And we've got some. Gideon Rosa's already got one in about Samuel and Pemba. So fire away with those, and we'll kind of our first portion goes about an hour. And then we jump into the Q&A. So, Vince, let's talk practice. There was there's not a ton that we're going to be able to share. We're not going to be able to say, hey, look, we saw all these things. There was no team, no one-on-ones. We saw stretch, and we saw the first 5 periods, which was a lot of individual stuff. So we saw a lot of teaching, Vince.
It was different.
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll get into that. But so I just want to make people know, there's only so much we're going to be able to give you today. We're not going to tell you, hey, look, Notre Dame's going to win a national championship based on what we saw today, right? And that's just not the reality of it. But we'll share with you kind of what we saw. I was able to get some video of the practice that we had that I could look at, so I'll be able to talk about offensive line play, talk about some of the things I noticed from the videos that the guys did that we did. We did the offensive line video was so good. I just made the whole practice highlights offensive line stuff. I was just so fired up. And I turned the volume up so you could hear Coach Easton teaching.
Oh, yeah.
Which was great. So Chris did a great job getting that video. So we'll talk about that today as well. So, but Vince, I just want to kind of kick things off because the first thing you told me was it was a way different structure for practice.
Yes, way different structure. And that was – so normally, for the last 10 years, for the last decade or more, it's been – the first period is on air, and it's the offensive, units. They go down the field and they throw the ball and they go down until they get a touchdown. And then
call it team takeoff, right?
Right. And then the second team goes, and then the third team goes, and it gives the people that are watching us, media, an opportunity to see who's running with the first team, who's running with the second team, et cetera, et cetera. Now that's all you get
funny
out of
because
that.
Then they'd get to team and 4 of the dudes are different, and but at least give us something to report on.
They gave us something. It gave us a nugget, if you will. But they got done stretching today, and they went in straight into individual stuff. I was like, oh, and I already had my notes ready to go. I was going to write it all down. Didn't even matter.
Right.
And so they went straight to individuals, and the individual stuff that they were doing a lot of circuit stuff. Which I thought was interesting. And there's only so much that you can do. Obviously, there's no pads. All they had were helmets on. So that's important to understand. I want to make sure everybody gets that because this first day, they're not going to have pads on for a few days. And so they did circuits. They did, ball security circuits. They did ball destruction circuits defensively.
You know what it reminded me of, Vince, from from watching the practice, it was a lot like the changes that Mike Elko brought when he first came over. If you remember, Mike Elko put a high premium on if you want to force turnovers, you got to practice forcing turnovers. And it's not just by picking a pass off and team. You've got to practice stripping the ball. There was a drill that they did with the D-line where the D-line would pass rush, stop like a ball was thrown behind them. They'd have to redirect and chase and strip the ball downfield.
Right.
I mean, just not a lot of stuff we saw in the past.
Not at all.
It was, we saw everybody just going through strip drills, offensive players working on protecting the football. That was, to me, a great way to start. Like, to me, the team takeoff is fine. I never liked it. I never got it. I just was always like, look, we're going out on air. We're not going full speed. Let's just go to Indy and get some work in. That was always kind of my stance when I was a coach and we do that team takeoff stuff. But it was good to see that they kind of nixed that for now and just went right to work. Because, again, it's a tone-setting period. That first period's a tone-setting period, Vince. And team takeoff, defensively, they would go full speed. If remember under Clark Lee, they would do the drops, and they would sprint. You had to get up line. They would go full speed. Offensively, it's kind of like, we're going tempo, but, guys are catching the ball and stopping. It's just like it's antithetical to what you actually want to be on offense.
Right.
I never liked it. So I love that they just went right to work. Hey, let's go get better right now. Team takeoff to me doesn't get you better. It gets you into some kind of rhythm, I guess. I don't know if it's like something you just – I did it because the coach I worked for did it, who did it because the coach I worked for did it.
Exactly. And I will say that the interesting part for me is that this is the first practice, right? This is really the first practice of the Marcus Freeman era, okay? I mean, we can talk about bowl prep and everything, but he was just tending the store at that point, in my opinion, for lack of a better analogy.
I mean, there was coaches on the staff that weren't going to be here.
Exactly.
We knew. And there was coaches that there were spots where they didn't have a coach.
Right. Yes, absolutely. So
yes, it's his team. He made this. Hey, look, we're going to send the veterans out the right way. That was their focus. Now the focus, to your point, Vince, is this is now the team. And
what you do first in the first practice. What you do first is what you are putting an emphasis on. Like that, to me, that sets the tone for what you want to be as a team. And I did that with my baseball kids at the high school level. Like, hey, we're going to learn how to play catch the correct way. Right. You know what I mean? This is how you dress at practice. And I realize that's more elementary, but the point is you start with what you emphasize.
Right.
And it was very clear to me what the emphasis is for Marcus Freeman. It's getting in and out of drills. It's ball security. It's ball destruction. It's all of these different things. And I will also say, and I told you this on the phone, Brian, and I'm sure we're going to get into it a little bit more, but one of the absolute best parts of practice for me was that one of the drills that the wide receivers were doing was how to get off press coverage.
Didn't you say it was like one of the first drills they did?
Yes. And once
they were
separated,
working on advanced techniques and things like that. It was really nice.
And Chancey Stuckey was, I know I'm jumping all over the place here and I apologize, but I was trying to keep an eye on the new coaches and what they sounded like.
Let's just dive into that, Vince. I mean, because I see you chomping at the bit. So first of all, the first thing about the receiver practice that I think is important was Joe Wilkins Jr. has been cleared to practice.
Yeah,
that's huge.
That surprised me. I did not expect to see him out there.
I thought he would be running around, but he got hurt in October.
Yeah.
So the fact that he's been fully cleared and Coach Freeman said he's full go, that is huge for the receiver depth chart. They now have a veteran that's got some leadership. I mean, Braden Lindsey's a veteran, but Braden's got to worry about Braden. Joe's got natural leadership ability. And my concern was with Joe is he going to fall behind sort of the younger, more talented players? He's going to miss much because Joe needed to be taught the advanced, route running level, master's level classes as well. And he wasn't getting that at Notre Dame. So I didn't want him to miss on that. So he's now going to be part of that. Plus now you've got 6 scholarship receivers, which may not seem like a lot, but when you're not running scout team, that's huge. You now have, including Matt Salerno, who is, Matt Salerno's a quality football player for what you need to get out of him in the spring. You now have a full 2 deep in 11 personnel.
And that's important.
And that's
because
huge.
Look, when you're talking about the depth chart and you're talking about, okay, well, there's 2 guys at quarterback that are competing, right? That's a 1 and a 2. Then there's a big drop off to 3 and 4. So whoever's running with the third team is going to be running either with a true freshman who's supposed to be going to prom next week or next month, or you're running with a guy who has had 0 collegiate snaps even at practice, Ron Paulus. So you kind of want those 6 scholarship guys because they're working with the 2 quarterbacks that are competing. And I think that's important. And I realize it's only one guy different. I get that. But you can move guys from first to second, second to first. You can kind of rotate those 6 so that they're both working with the different quarterbacks, et cetera, et cetera. And you could say that across the board. But I think that's really important for this wide receiving core because you're not going to have that one walk-on or that one young guy who just, frankly, doesn't fit in with those other guys. I'm not saying that to be disparaging. I'm sure that those guys are all wonderful humans. But it makes it easier.
It does. Here's something else I noticed that I liked in the first drill. So obviously going through individual, I didn't get to see if they were working on top ends and all that, but here's something I noticed when they were doing ball drills. So there's always drills where you run at the coach and he throws the ball at you.
Right.
When Notre Dame did that in the past, they would try to throw it right at him or throw it high. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Like day one maybe, but like what I saw today was none of the balls were hitting him in the chest. They were all
purpose,
low.
by the way.
They were all low. They were all outside. I thought that was great because like that, if a receiver can't run straight at a coach and a ball hit him in the chest and catch it, then he shouldn't be on scholarship at Notre Dame.
Right.
So like if he can't do that, that's not making you better. Right. That's just doing a drill to do a drill. There was purpose behind Coach Stuckey's drills.
Every single thing he did and said had purpose.
Yes. And it was like, so again, that drill, just here, that's just doing a drill to get warmed up. These weren't drills to get warmed up. These were drills to build on a technique. And that was something I love. So like, I mean, we're seeing balls low. We're seeing the balls hit him in the gut. We're seeing and there was some drops because you could tell they were just kind of thinking it was just going to be right here. Like they were like, oh shoot, it's down here. Oh, it's down here. That's going to make you better. That's going to make you because what you're trying to accomplish is obviously there's a technical aspect of, the balls here. Like one thing is that I think Notre Dame's players have struggled with is like on balls that are out of way. They have a tendency to go like this when the ball's above their chest. And what I've always did with my receivers, because for whatever reason, that's a natural thing, is I always say you flip your hips. And then when it gets below your chest, then you flip your hips. Because what I say is do this. I tell everybody do this, with your front arm and your back, and you're going to feel tension here and here. You're going to feel a tension. That's not good. But if you go here, you don't feel that tension. It's a more natural way to grab the football. You have to work on those things, right?
Absolutely.
And so, but you can't.
He was coaching that specific. He was coaching the hands and how they're supposed to be placed. He was coaching that up specifically.
But if they know where the ball's going to go, then you're going to be prepared to do it. The fact that he was throwing it all over, you didn't know if it was going to be high, outside, low. That was intentional. You want to put them immediately in a situation where this isn't comfortable. And the thing that I think great pass catching teachers focus on, and this is something that I learned, honestly, from Urban Meyer, watching him at Bowling Green. This is something I learned from him and Billy Gonzalez and Dan Mullen when they were there, was you want your pass catchers always, when the ball's in the air, there's like just a laser focus, meaning there's no period where you're just you're playing catch and you're just no, when you're playing catch, you are attack, tuck. There is never a just lackadaisical period when you're catching the football.
Right. Absolutely.
And we saw that today from Coach Stuckey, where it was like, hey, you've got to be locked in. Even though this is a warm-up drill, you got to be locked in. Man, Vince, I got to tell you, because like we would say we'd see the same drills at receiver every single time. And they just were like stuff that you would be teaching your varsity team, your JV team in high school day one. I mean, that's the stuff they were doing.
Yes.
And today we saw them. Right.
It's so to kind of build on the Chancey Stuckey coaching and all of that, like you can tell he's a former receiver, number one, because he was literally showing them how to get off the line in some of those drills. Like he would demonstrate for them what he wanted to see. And if
you haven't seen Chancey Stuckey, Chancey looks like he can still play a little bit.
That's what I'm saying. And like,
if I'm starting a 7-on-7 team of adults in South Bend, that's my number one draft pick at receiver. Okay?
Right.
Chancey can still move.
And he's got some get off. And so, and as he was demonstrating, I don't know if I got this on video or not, but as he was demonstrating the get off in front of, they had a dummy standing right in front of the guys, and they were working on not the hands, but their footwork on getting around that press coverage. Right. And as he was demonstrating, 3 guys back was Lindsey, and he was just trying to mirror, and he's just doing his own thing. He was trying to mirror what Chancey Stuckey was showing them, and he would kind of do it behind him, and he was kind of doing the footwork behind him, and you could tell he had never been taught this particular move ever.
Right.
And he's a fifth-year senior at the University of Notre Dame. Okay?
And he's been in 2 playoff games.
Yes.
He's been,
that was like mind-blowing that he had to okay, I need to do this to get off. Okay. And he's like, he's mimicking and mirroring what Stuckey's doing. And I'm like, oh my God, he's never seen this before. It was just, it just reinforces what we've been telling people all along. Right. And I love, and again, to my point that what you do early is who you are and who you want to be. Chancey Stuckey sees what these guys aren't good at and what he wants to emphasize. And that's what they were doing on day one. And we were only there for 20, 25 minutes, right? And that's what they were doing. And that just speaks volumes to me.
Yeah. And just like we saw a lot of that at different position groups. We saw the D-line working a ton on hand placement. They were working stunts on practice one.
Yes.
And different types of stunts. And just they were putting him in a lot of uncomfortable situations, which is kind of where you want to be. And so when you look at receiver, there's not a whole lot to gather from how they looked.
Right.
Because, again, they're all scholarship receivers at Notre Dame.
Right.
And there was a couple drills they did that I don't think we should necessarily specifically talk about because it's kind of like schematic stuff.
Yeah, I know.
But it was nice to see, okay. Because, again, it was like one of the first drills they did. And you're like, okay, like you said, what you do in practice one is something that's going to be like, hey, look, we're doing this in practice one for a reason, guys. And that is something you definitely want to see. And so I was just like, a lot of things were like, okay, is the offense going to continue kind of what we saw late last year? That's something we don't know, right?
Based on the drill you're referring to, I loved it.
Right.
I loved it because they divided up the receivers. Not every receiver was in that drill.
Right.
And so again, to the point of
guys, the faster guys were doing that.
To the point of they're not just doing drills to do drills, right? That particular drill that they were doing, that's not for Deion Colsey, for example, because he's not going to do that, right? So he was off with, I think, a GA doing some other stuff, or maybe they were off with Chancey Stuckey, and then Tommy Reese, who was with the quarterbacks and with some of those shifty guys doing this other drill. It was like, guys, why have they not been doing this before? Like, it makes so much sense, but it was so beautiful because they were getting these guys the ball, and they were, to me, it was getting them the ball in creative ways. So
yeah. So receiver-wise, Vince, again, just not a lot we're going to be able to see. Not a lot we're going to be able to see from a lot of the position groups, but,
we saw no one-on-ones. We saw no,
there was no team. There was no half lines. It was all individual.
Right. So I want to make sure
some things that kind of stand out from you. Obviously you had a chance to watch. You told me you watched a lot of the quarterbacks.
I did. Yeah,
I did it. I didn't get to see much. What just some impressions you had of watching the guys, how they looked, filling out. Absolutely. Maybe, how anybody doing anything different, that kind of. Another thing that I forgot to talk about is too, they were working on in the receiver drills too. I saw working on actually another group had a video out. They were working on over the shoulder stuff, properly catching the ball over the shoulder. Again, just it was just nice to see that kind of stuff. But anyway, back to the quarterbacks. I want to kind of what you saw from the quarterbacks.
Yeah, so there was 4 quarterbacks that were dressed, right? It was Tyler Buckner, it was Drew Pine, it was Ron Paulus, and it was Steve Angeli. So those were the 4 guys that were dressed in red jerseys. So those were the guys that were going through the various drill work. And to say that there were 2 in one category and 2 in another category would be an understatement. But
there's a noticeable gap. But I'll say this: the one thing I noticed is all 4 of the guys in the drills that you sent me.
Yeah,
the footwork was real efficient. All 4 of them, really clean, crisp. Going through the bag drills, really clean, crisp.
And Reese was coaching up all 4 of them. And he would stop the drill. Right. Yeah, absolutely. But he would stop the drill and he would go over things with Ronnie Paulus, and he was doing some different things. And they were really focusing on the basics, okay, as far as the quarterback room is concerned. From a big picture standpoint, it's what we've been telling you guys from the beginning, right? Drew Pine is that outgoing leader. After they got done with the stretch lines, he was the first one to the huddle with Coach Freeman. dapping everybody up, getting everybody excited. And Buckner was there as well, but he was just there. Like that's just that's not his personality. That's not who
yet.
he is.
Now, I have been told he's been showing a lot more of that in winter workouts, but that's going to take time once you get into practice setting to really evolve. And I'm going to say something else. Yeah. If Drew Pine somehow got beat out by Steve Angeli and was the number 3 quarterback, he'd be doing the exact same thing.
Absolutely correct.
That's what I love about that kid. That's just who he is. I mean, it's not fake. It's not like I got to show leadership to win the job. That's just who Drew is. I mean, that's just who he is. I mean, and it's why his teammates love him. Again, it's not to say that they don't love Tyler Buckner. It's just, sometimes we should be able to just praise a guy, and it's not that the other guy doesn't have it. It's just that's something that people love about this kid.
Absolutely.
And that's what you see from Drew. I've noticed one thing I noticed in drills too, Vince. He has seemed to work on, and we saw him kind of putting something out, but he is definitely working on speeding up his release and throwing off platform more. I definitely noticed that, which here's what that tells me, Vince. We know Buckner can already do that. He did it in high school. He did it last year.
And he was doing it today.
Right. If Drew Pine's working on that, it says a lot about the kind of offense that they're going to run at Notre Dame this year. That it's going to look a lot. I mean, a lot of stuff that we were excited about late last year was not stuff they were doing just because they had to, because they couldn't run. It's what they're going to do.
Right.
And that is something that I definitely noticed today that I was like,
yeah,
that's an interesting deal, right? Because we've seen Drew work on that stuff in the past on his own with quarterback coaches, but we didn't really see him do it a ton in practices. It was more structured and all that kind of stuff. That was encouraging to see as
Absolutely. Well. And I will say the accuracy was great for the first 2 guys. I thought the ball was coming out of Tyler's hands. It was a tight spiral. It was on target. It was effortless. And it was really for both guys. Both the top 2 guys, there was a big difference in an accuracy standpoint, from a velocity standpoint, from the other 2 guys. It just was. I was the little bit that we got to see. I liked what I saw from the top 2 guys.
Yeah, I saw Steve Angeli make some throws during just the warm-ups, and I thought he looked comfortable. Yeah, I thought he didn't look. A lot of freshmen get out there and they just look nervous. He didn't look nervous.
No, he didn't.
But what we saw in high school was his ball placement's not good, and that's kind of what was there. So he's a work in progress. But I will say, I thought his footwork, I thought he was clean. He looked in really good shape, like he was thin and looked in really good shape. His footwork was good. I thought he looked comfortable going through, because that's where you really see a young guy like just look terrible. It's going through bag drills and stuff like that. So he looked really comfortable doing that. Tommy Reese was constantly focusing with him on your footwork, your steps, your stance. And I thought that was
what you do.
He did not look like his head was swimming at all during the individual periods. Now, again, it may, we don't know what happened when they got the team and stuff, but so I like that, real quick, compact release. His ball placement's just not great. And that's something he's going to have to continue to work on. Yeah.
It was
high and off. And that's not where you want to be, because high and off gets tipped and picked a lot. So, so we shall.
The other 2 guys are ball out quick. I was impressed with theirs. And again, they were just throwing to managers who weren't really moving. It was just get the ball out quick more than anything else. But I agree with you. The drills that they were running were very much, hey, quick, get the ball out, kind of stuff, which I really like. Didn't see them throw the ball long. Didn't even really show them throw the ball intermediate. There were some longer throws, but it was from like hash to the sideline type throws, not anything, 10 or more yards down the field. So that still remains to be seen. But what I saw today was really good.
Right.
And I will say Angeli looked a little small, but that's not surprising because he's a senior. And he's also standing next to Ronnie Paulus. He's actually a really big kid.
Good sized kid, yeah.
Right. So,
I thought Ron's footwork today was solid. I going through the bags, he looked like he's improved. His foot speed is improved a little bit, which is a huge need for him because he had very slow feet in high school.
They basically had to start fresh with Ron. He had to be built up from the ground up. He's got natural tools. Obviously, we know who his dad is, right? He's a big, strong, physical kid. he was throwing the ball better today than I saw him do in high school. I mean, he had a year off. He had a chance to, get stronger and all that. But he looked better today than I remember seeing him in high school. But he's a project. He's a guy they had to start from the beginning with. So I would say that.
Let's talk. We're going to do O-line last because that's where I'm going to.
We go running backs if you want.
Let's talk a little. Did you see? I mean, with running backs, honestly, they all look healthy and athletic. And
exactly.
The one thing we will note at running back, Sebo Flemister, Marcus Freeman announced that he is not on the roster, and that status was not going to change. So Sebo's Notre Dame career is over.
He was not out there. I did notice that.
I mean, he was on the roster. It was weird because they put him on the roster, right?
Yeah.
But then when they didn't have Jadarian Price's number on the roster, but as soon as Jadarian showed up in January, they signed him number 20, which is Sebo's number. So it's like, why put him on the roster if
Jadarian was out there
his number away?
Right. Jadarian was out there in drills, and I was like, that doesn't look like Sebo.
No.
So yeah,
Sebo got fast.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. It's funny that he mentioned that after practice because I was like, that does not look like Sebo.
Yeah.
But
I thought Audric Estime is still ripped, but looked leaner.
Mm-hmm.
Vince, did you pick up on that from watching the drills? Like, he's still huge, right? But like, he just looked. I thought last year he looked a little too muscular, which isn't necessarily great for a running back. He's still ripped, but his upper body just looked a little bit more like less like a bodybuilder and more like a big running back.
Agreed.
I thought that was a good thing to see.
It allowed his feet to be a little bit faster today. Not that they weren't before, but it was just it looked different than what he looked like at the end of last year. I'll just say that. Right. And I will also say that Chris Tyree looked thicker to me than he did in the fall. So I was actually impressed by that. And he was obviously in the front of all the running back drills. So he's clearly the leader of that group.
That was in the intel piece that we had up last week about the offense. That was the one thing that my sources were like, Chris Tyree has been a monster this offseason. It was exact words. Like, I mean, he attacked the weight room with fervor.
Yeah, he looks like a grown man. I mean, we didn't see him doing anything.
He hasn't lost his quickness and burst. That's the thing that we saw. He hasn't lost his quickness and burst.
And that is, we saw him doing bag work. They were going around bags. His feet looked great. We didn't see anything. There was no straight line, anything for the running back. So I'm going to assume that he kept his speed because, of course, I would assume that. But
that's from what I've heard. That's not an issue.
Right. Yeah. So, but he just looked a little bit more grown manish. To me in drills today. So that's really my only takeaway from the running backs, to be honest with you, from what we were able to see.
Right. Let's go defense.
Okay.
What'd you see kind of just from overall structure, kind of what you saw from a practice standpoint? Anything stand out to you in regards to, hey, these guys look good, or I saw this guy, or this is not even like look good, but like more so like from a coaching standpoint, from a structure standpoint.
Yeah.
How active was Coach Golden during this period? I'm just kind of curious, just like how it all went down.
So they actually did the drill work a little bit differently than I've ever seen it before. During some of their circuit stuff, they were working with like one-man sleds, and they were working on some block destruction and some things like that. Like the linebackers were working with the running backs, and they were all going through the same drill. It wasn't like one-on-ones or anything like that. They were all – so it was kind of like special teams where they all kind of mix in and they all kind of do the same drill, but they weren't necessarily just doing special team stuff. It was like, hey, you guys are all football players. Let's do some football stuff. You know what I mean? I hope that makes sense. And then they would rotate, and there was like 3 groups, and they would rotate between the 3 groups. So that's what they were doing first, while the D linemen were off doing what you had mentioned before, and they were just working on stunts, which means they had a guy with a football on a stick, and there was 2 guys with like the arm pads, and they were the guys were working on some twists and some stunts and some things like that. This guy goes first, and then this guy holds him up, and then he goes. And so they were getting into it, which was a lot of fun to watch. I'll tell you what, Tyson Ford does not look like a freshman.
No,
that I will tell you.
He doesn't move like a guy that big either.
Oh, holy smoky,
really well.
That was,
and I'll tell you what, I would argue, Vince, that from what I saw in the drills I saw, the guy with the best first step on the D line is Aiden Gobira.
I knew you were going to say that. 91. That was the one.
Oh my gosh! He is super skinny. Like you see him out there next to those other guys. Like you see him next to Riley Mills, and you're like, that dude needs a sandwich. You know what I mean? Like, take that kid to a buffet. But he's super long, and his first step is special. Like we saw it in high school, but you want to see it when he's next to Foskey and Lacey and Cross and Mills. And it was just as special as it looked when he was going against high school dudes. His first step is nasty.
It's quick.
And for a 265-pound kid, Tyson Ford looked he's an athletic dude now. I mean, he's an athletic dude.
Yeah. It did like there are high school coaches that would give an awful lot to have a kid like that on their team. Let's just put it that way. He looked like he belonged on day one at practice at Notre Dame. So he definitely stood out to me from a girth and a size standpoint. No question about it.
Right.
Marist, flying all over the place. I mean, they didn't do anything team or anything like that, but just he attacks drills just with a reckless abandon, and I mean that in the most positive way possible. Like you could see number 8, and he stood out when
he has filled out.
Yes, I agree with that as well.
He's filled out. He looked good.
Absolutely, no question about it. So that was good to see. Again, a lot of the line. So after they kind of did some of that circuit, then they went in and they were doing. They had like the big circles, and they would have a guy with the ball, and he would start to run around the circle, and then they'd have a guy catch up from behind, pop the ball out, and then they'd have to recover it, which is again the things you emphasized earlier, the things that are important, and I loved every second of that. So that was great, and they would kind of rotate between stations there. Then the linebackers were doing more recognition. They were doing formation recognition. So a guy would go in motion, and then they would shift over, and they would do that. So it wasn't really anything. It was more of more mental reps than physical reps. So unfortunately, I didn't get to see the freshmen a bunch, the freshman linebackers that I really wanted to see, because it was just more mental recognition than anything else. Right. But c'est la vie. We were only there for 5 periods. So
couple observations that I saw from the videos. Riley Mills played a lot of end in the drills we saw, and we even saw Howard Cross play a little bit there. They're gonna try everybody out at big end, basically, to see who fits best. I thought Riley looked really filled out and quick. I was impressed by that. A guy that I saw in a couple that formed tackling drills on the sled, and I was like, who is that? He was working with sort of like it looked like it was like half rovers and half DNs.
Yeah.
Osita Ekwonu. He looked good, like athletically. He looked in shape because he had missed all of last year with an injury. And he showed some pop, Vince, when he was working the backs. That's number 34. He was working those drills. I was really happy to see Osita out there, because I'm thinking like that kid might have to go on medical. I mean, because he had been out. I mean, his foot was bad. He was moving really well. So I was happy to see Osita Ekwonu moving through drills, because he's a guy that we haven't talked about at all at Viper or linebacker or anything else.
Right.
And
he
was running around a little bit. I mean, that's a former 4-star kid that we had some expectations for. So it was nice to see him. I saw Josh Burnham is massive. Like, I mean, we had it in our intel feature, but I mean, he's the biggest linebacker they have. I mean, just size, length, and Junior looks like kind of what you'd think he'd look like. Jalen looks like he's added about 5 to 10 pounds, since we saw him in the All-Star game. I saw a couple clips where he was running, and he has got some juice now. I mean, but what little bit we saw from the freshman linebackers, that's an athletic group of kids.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, they looked like they belonged with the group. You know what I mean? There was one point, I can't remember who it was, but somebody pulled Josh aside, Burnham, and it was kind of, coaching him up. He kind of not messed up a drill, but didn't do it exactly right. And so one of the older guys was kind of coaching him up a little bit, and they're very receptive to that.
We saw that a ton today, and it's intentional. I'm going to give you an example. So I was talking to Chris Chris is the guy. He's one of Vince's former offensive line coaches, and Chris was doing a lot of the video today, and so he took a ton of offensive line video, which was awesome. But he was telling me that what Harry was doing Coach Heastan was doing during practice was he would go over to Blake Fisher, who wasn't in the drill, and he'd say, "Hey, what was your thoughts on that drill? What was your thoughts on that rep? What did you think about this? What did you think about that?" And I love that, because you want your players engaged. You want them to be able to express what they're supposed to do. That we saw a lot of that. I heard a lot of that today, of coaches not just teaching, but then you hear veterans kind of also backing up what the coaches are saying. Or if Al Golden's over here talking to this guy, like you said, JD Bertrand or Maris may take a guy under their shoulder and say, "Hey, here's what we're doing over here." So we saw a lot of that today, and that's what we talked about the other day, Vince. When you're in multiple years within the system, you now have a structure in place where it just doesn't have to be the 10 coaches.
Right, exactly.
And so we saw that play out today. So that was nice to see. But yeah, Maris is filled out. He looked explosive. Ryan Barnes looked really fluid. Jaden Mickey looked really fluid during some of the drills. I see I just triggered a thought.
When you started talking about DBs, the Joseph kid from Northwestern.
Brandon Joseph.
Oh my goodness. They were doing a drill where they had a dummy kind of set up. And it was a coach that would either kind of loft the ball in, or he'd throw it hard or whatever. And it was towards the dummy. And obviously that's going to be a receiver. Joseph, and I realize it's a dummy, but his closing speed, it was a line drive throw, is his closing speed. The ball and he arrived at the dummy at the same time. And he just, he basically cut the dummy in half with his body. I mean, that boy can hit, and you can tell he wants to hit. Like there's going to be some collisions in the secondary this year that are going to make people go, "Oh my goodness." Right. You know what I mean? Like, he fit in just fine at safety today. I really like the way he was moving around. That's for sure.
So Vince, let's wrap things up with the offensive line.
Okay.
So I got to see almost every rep that the O-line took because of the video that Chris took today, which was awesome, by the way. So it was, I was kind of like, I just so happy. The reason I was happy is because you're just hearing things be taught that you're just like, oh my gosh, it's so nice to hear that again. Coach Heastan used the words run through, work through, drive through so many times today. Yeah. And it's just, and all they were doing was working on, and he talked about get vertical. Right? I'll have to send you the video, Vince. Just the uncut video, because we can only put 3 minutes in, so I had to cut some of the stuff out. So I'll send you the uncut version here later today. But man, it was nice to hear it. He was super fired up, because somebody was like, how was his demeanor? Like, was he just cussing kids? He's never cussed kids out in individual unless they're being lazy. Like, that's team. That's when you're out in team. That's when but he's always been a teacher, an instructor, during individual. And that's what he was today. He was vintage Heastan. And you know what? He was moving around better. I don't know if he had like knee surgery or something like that, but he was like, there was one time where he like waddled like 20 yards. I mean, he was like just really fast going downfield, praising Blake Fisher. Like, something Blake Fisher did got him super fired up. He's like, that's the effing drill. That's the effing drill. Like, he was super fired up like that. Like, meaning like, you did it exactly how I want it done, kind of thing. And he was, just a lot of teaching, a lot of instruction, but we kept hearing about pad level, of course, but we kept hearing about drive, get vertical. There was one time where, and you can see it on the video, where Michael Carmody kind of is working a double team and he doesn't really stay engaged. And he was talking like you don't avoid the guy, you go through the guy, right? That's what you got to do. They're working on combo blocks. It was Michael Carmody who was working at center, by the way. We should probably talk about that. Alignment-wise, we saw Michael Carmody at center today, working behind Zeke Correll, which was very interesting, because we hope he moves inside, gets a chance. He was at center. We saw Blake Fisher at right tackle, Joe Alt at left tackle. We saw Josh Lugg at right guard. But it was Rocco Spindler and Michael Carmody working a drill together. And Michael left the combo way too early. He went real wide to try to get to the linebacker. And then you'd hear Coach Easton talk about like he would question them, like, he goes, when you do this, you're supposed to do what? And you could tell Michael wasn't sure the answer. You're supposed to do what? He goes, run through them, and you heard a lot of that. And then you saw just the emphasis on driving your feet through contact. It was like, drive. I mean, you'd hear them say that, which again, what's a big point of emphasis that we have said that was lacking, and something that was something Harry Heastan and Alex Bars talked about this. He's like, we would work on vertical push every single practice. Right. And it was vintage Coach Heastan. And, and they all looked, and I mean, Blake is still massive, but he looked lean, a lean 330, right?
Like Chris
he looked good. Right.
Yeah.
Joe Alt looked great. Carmody looked thin down, like his gut has kind of gone away. Like his arms need to get built up a little bit, but it was nice. They were moving. I mean, they were coming off quick. They were moving around. The only guy that I didn't really thought like just really flew off the ball was Rocco Spindler. He's big. Like he's the one guy that's kind of got like a traditional big body, kind of a bigger gut, big thighs. He's just a big kid. But they looked athletic for the most part as a group. We saw Tosh Baker working behind Joe Wald at left tackle, Caleb Johnson at right tackle. We saw Rocco and Andrew Kostovic, and then Rocco at left guard, and then Zeke Carell and Michael Carmody at center. And then is it Quinn Murphy, I think is the name of the walk-on kid that was behind Josh Lugg at right guard.
Okay.
So so you had Rocco at left guard, which tells me, look, they're going to give him a chance to compete, right?
Yeah.
But I'll tell you the guy that in the drills I saw that I was most encouraged by. I mean, Blake looked great, shocker, right? Like Joe Alt was getting a good push and all that. The guy that I thought looked just really good was Josh Lugg. He looked lean.
He
came off the ball fast,
and
he came off with punch.
Yeah.
This was as confident as I've seen Josh Lugg in a drill in years.
Yeah.
And I think part of it's the health. I think getting the knee cleaned up, because he was playing through that. I mean, Brian Kelly even mentioned this. He played through that all year last year before they finally just got it cleaned up. And or no, not Brian Kelly. I think Marcus Freeman mentioned that. I'm sorry, in the bowl prep when they announced that he wasn't going to play. But he looked quick, and again, right, like we're talking relative with they didn't have pads on. It's
right.
Relative to what we've seen from him in the past. That's the point. To see Josh come off with the pads low, with the force, driving his feet through contact. I mean, that was a big thing, because Josh was one of those guys who was often very guilty of hit and stop. And that was a real big point of emphasis. There was one time where Andrew Kostovic, hit a guy and he was driving, but he kind of started to lunge. Coach, just kind of corrected him, and he had him run it again. And there was a period where it was Carmody and Rocco that I was talking about earlier. He made him run it 3 straight times until they got it perfect. And it was always just instruction. And then when they got it right, he was fired up. You could just tell he was excited to be out there. It was fun to see. There was a ton of teaching the things we were, you start to hear, you want to hear buzzwords. Okay, I want to hear about this. I want to hear about this. I want to hear about this.
Yeah,
drive, run through, keep, come out of your stance low. Guys weren't lifting up. There was one where it was Blake Fisher and Michael Mayer working a combo. And you're like, yeah, that's going to be fun to watch this year. Like they're both just explode off the ball. And, it was like, yeah, they're going to be fun to watch in some combos this year. So really encouraged by what I saw from the line. Just, again, looked in great shape. Guys looked thin, not thin, lean is the proper word for that. They were quick off the ball. The combos looked, they looked sharp for day one. Even the ones you had to correct, they weren't like, it was always a guy leaving too early, a guy being too quick. It was like, no, stay here until you get that, till that guy takes you over. It was Vince, it was nice to see. It was really nice to see that group working out and looking good. So a lot of encouraging things from the practice today. No
This
question.
was a non-padded practice, everybody. And that's how, the encouraging things that we saw, like I'm fired up to see the defensive line go up against the offensive line.
Yeah. And look, the reason we focus a lot on what was being taught is, again, like what we said the other day, which is if they don't look like great players today, they're they shouldn't be on scholarship at Notre Dame. And that's the big thing for us is trying not to get too, and I'm like dying right now looking at Frozen Vince right now. It's kind of hilarious, but that's the kind of thing that we kind of talked about is they're all going to look kind of good physically. There's an emphasis on number one, guys coming back from injuries, guys that maybe had bad bodies in the past, and really an emphasis on what's being taught. And I think for me, that was my biggest takeaway from today. So I'm not sure now. So is Vince frozen? Am I frozen? So I think Vince is now out of here because I don't know what happened, but Vince just kind of got caught for a while there. So I'm not quite sure what happened to Vince. But is everybody still with me down there? You guys still with me? Can I get some acknowledgement that we're still good, that it wasn't me also that screwed up or that they got lost, that it was Vince that got checked out of there. So, okay. So it looks like, it wasn't. You just got so excited talking about O-line play, Vince, that you just got, you just kind of got like locked up,
completely booted out, man. Yeah. Sorry about that.
It's all good. But no, I was just explaining like, look, the reason we focus so much on what was being taught today is because again, these are scholarship athletes at the University of Notre Dame. They're going to look good at, on the hoof, right? It's about, who's filled out, who's lost weight and those type of things. But it's also about what's being taught is the most important thing.
Absolutely. And again, it's what you emphasize. And when you hear the same things over and over, that's what Harry is emphasizing. And it's so important because those are the things that we feel like that's funny. It says Frozen Vince. Big Jim says Frozen Vince is wise, but non-committal. That's great. Yes. It's what you emphasize. And those are the things that they were lacking. Like what he was emphasizing were the things that we weren't seeing. And that was the most frustrating part. And now it's just like a breath of fresh air. I mean, honestly, that's what it is. And my favorite part was, granted, it is beautiful in South Bend. It's 70 degrees right now. Okay. Yeah. But the first position group to go outside as soon as they were done stretching, offensive lineman, boom, gone outside. Like it was like, okay, this is a different group now because the offensive linemen were often in the corner, inside, all these different things. Like I know that's such a little thing, but I was like, yeah, Harry's taking them outside. And there we go. And it wasn't 70 this morning at 8:00 in the morning, obviously.
Yeah, but it wasn't freezing either. I mean, they had some, there
was breath. You could see the breath, right? Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. So
but they were working, and
it was
just
awesome.
A lot of what I noticed kind of from some of the stuff you sent me, Vince, because again, I wasn't in practice today myself. I'm going off of what the videos that my guy sent me and some other folks have had. And so it was, but what I saw from the video you guys sent, because it was a really active practice.
Yes.
I mean, as soon as they start, they're going. I mean, they're going from drill to drill. All the drills are movement drills. There's quick instruction and then go and then coach on the fly. And that's so important. You need to be able to quickly introduce a drill, but a lot of times you'll introduce the whole thing in a meeting or things like that. And then you quickly, hey, here's what we're doing. And then let's go. Let's get to work. Right. And then you coach on the fly. Right. And it was nice to see that. Coaching on the fly means, in what I think Notre Dame's going to be offensively is not the high up tempo where you just go. But hey, we're going to do this play 3 straight times, but we're going to line back up and quickly go do it again. We're going to get to it. Right. We're going to get to it. We're going to get to it.
Right.
And so I just seeing all that. And I'll tell you something else, Vince, that I noticed too. I'm really curious to see how it's going to be like by practice 15. But when I'm watching the offensive guys run around, I'm thinking, is there anyone on this offense that can't run like real fast? There's a lot of speed.
There is
on offense. I mean, this is as athletic of a group as I've seen top to bottom at Notre Dame in a long time. I mean, there's been some groups with some great athletes at the top. 2015 team obviously was similar to this. And that team had Will Fuller receiver. This team has Chris Tyree running back. But just there's a lot of speed. I mean, I'm watching Lorenzo Styles today, and he looks like a veteran. I mean, he's gotten stronger, but man, his burst is outstanding. Braden's burst today was outstanding. Yes. Dion looked in really good shape. Dion Colsey looked in really good shape. And Jane Thomas looked really smooth.
He
has lost some weight,
but he's like a big dude.
He's a thick kid, but he had some bad weight on him last year because you got to remember, he had a really bad foot injury as a senior in high school that he played through. And I think that rehab kind of cost him some, ideal body work look. And we heard he was in much better shape, kind of during the bowl prep. But I kind of want to see it for myself, like, because he didn't play in the bowl game. And so,
Right.
yeah, you say he did a great job. Why don't you play him? I
Right,
get
exactly.
it, right? We're trying to win a ball game. And then you hear he's looking great during spring and some, during winter. He's like, okay, let's see it. And then you say, okay, well, let's see him do it. But he looks smooth. Jaden looks smooth out there today, like really fluid.
Right.
That's another thing that I noticed too, is there was a lot of drills of them get the ball out in space and do something with it. There was a lot of that today as well, which again adds to some of the other things we saw. That says, yeah, this is going to be an offense. It's going to be about, we've got dynamic athletes. Let's find ways to give them the ball.
And based on what we saw in the very limited amount that we saw today, they're going to do that. Like I feel confident that they are going to do that. So yeah, like I love it.
So practice 1 is in the books for Notre Dame, and obviously
yes,
a fun day. Always love seeing Notre Dame get the work in, and it's good. It's just interesting to see. You could just kind of see Coach Freeman after practice was just like, and just you see that first practice joy in a coach. You know what I mean? Like I want to just leave here and go watch the film. But there's a lot of excitement. But those are the main takeaways that we saw from today's practice. The next one will be, Vince, is the next one going to be next weekend? Is that the next one we get, the 26th?
Yeah, because
the
25th is pro day, and then the 26th we get the whole practice. So that's the one I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah. So is that I'm going to pull up the schedule here real quick just to make sure. Is that the absolute next one that you guys? Yes, the next practice won't be until Saturday. So next Saturday, Notre Dame will have a practice Saturday. Now, keep in mind, in spring, it's every other day. They don't practice back to back to back. So they'll have a practice Saturday, and then they'll have a practice Tuesday, then Thursday. Pro day is Friday, and then Saturday. So we will see practice 5. And then after that, we won't see him again until practice 8. Then after that, we won't see him again until practice 12. And then, of course, the blue gold game. So 1 down, 4 more to go, Vince, or 3 more to go, really, right? 3 more practices to go.
Saturday is going to be the fun one because we get to see the whole practice. So, we should have more information. They're going to be fully padded. There's going to be scrimmaging-ish going on. I'm sure that they're going to have some officials there, things of that nature.
Yeah, they will have officials there. I've already gotten
that guy right there is going to be there. So that'll be great.
The whole team.
And Sean's going to be there.
Not going to be there.
So we will have 1, 2, 3. We'll have 4 people in attendance, and of course, Brian in the background pulling the strings. So, so it's going to be that should be a good one. That should be fun.
Yeah. Oh well, it is what it is. All right, so Vince, thanks for the report. And then Vince got out of school for a little bit today because
fantastic. I went and worked on my baseball field. Like it was great.
Got to take an oil change. Got to watch Notre Dame practice.
Vince, how'd you work that one, man? You got some seniority over there, I guess, huh?
Hey, it's called a personal day.
So they start feeling better around lunchtime.
They can't even question you when you take a personal day. So, I got to go.
Love working for the government, man. Gotta love working for the government. All right, Vince.
I know.
Appreciate you.
Thanks, guys.
So, Ryan, today wasn't just a busy day for the Notre Dame coaching staff from a practice standpoint. Today was also a very busy recruiting day. Coach Freeman talked about it during his press conference today. Today was the pot of gold. We saw the pot of gold release again. It was a big thing for Notre Dame last year. They had a ton of success with it last year. And another one today. And, we were kind of going over the list yesterday of just kind of the guys this staff is on. And it is a really impressive early list of players that they're after. And we saw, and it's still going on. They're going to be sending out pots. They're doing it in like waves, it's like different groups and stuff like that. Just a lot of really talented players. And it's just one of those things, Ryan, that you want to create buzz in your program from a recruiting standpoint. There's a lot of buzz today when it comes to Notre Dame recruiting in the 2024 class. You're even seeing 2023 kids get excited because they're like, I remember when I got my pot of gold. Keon Keeley was tweeting about it. And, it was a very exciting day. Notre Dame is taking full advantage of St. Patrick's Day when it comes to the pot of gold pitch.
I mean, I mean, it's like the perfect wave here, right? Like it's not only is it St. Patty's Day, which like, it's cliche, but it's fun, it's fun thing. You're the Fighting Irish, you're celebrating something big like that on St. Patty's Day. It's the first day of spring practice. Like it's just like everything aligns. And I mean, we're gonna have some.
We talked about this earlier. You won your first round, your NCAA tournament game after midnight. So you got that dub,
game-winning shot too.
Right. So yeah, it's been a good day so far for Notre Dame. There's no doubt about it.
And I mean, it's so cool, man, because I read over, because I just did obviously a little bit of a write-up that should be live somewhat soon, where just kind of explaining the whole, kind of origins behind the pot of gold. And I of course I went back and looked at your pot of gold article from last year just to kind of see how you kind of framed it last year. And
because it was kind of the kickoff for it. You know what I mean?
Right,
like it was kind of like they had done pot of gold in the past, but it was a completely different thing. Like this is the first time they did it, like where it was a like they would just kind of do it and it would just send like cool stuff out and there's like cards. But like last year it was like a offer push to let, like, you're our guys, right? You're the guys we're going after. So it's completely reframed, and it was the first time they've done it in that form, which I thought was really awesome.
Yeah, and I mean it's cool too from like the social media aspect of everything, right? Like it's cool for the kids to just get, because obviously that's what matters most, of how you are kind of moving the needle with some of these players, but also, I mean, for the simple fact that like you see all these pot of golds that are just popping up on Twitter. Like it's a Twitter campaign. It's a social media campaign. It's something that's going to move the needle with recruits. And I always think, Brian, like recruiting is just an ever evolving process, right? Like it does not stay the same. What is relevant to recruits now was not relevant or flashy to recruits 10, 15 years ago. Like times are changing. And I think that the great recruiters today, I think that Notre Dame has several great recruiters on their staff, the whole staff in general, you have to change with the times a little bit. And I think that this is a fun thing. I think it reaches a lot of different people. I mean, somebody tagged both of us in one of their I think it was Xavier Hamilton tagged us in one of his announcements or whatever. We retweeted it.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's blowing up.
Kids that I never even heard of that apparently followed me on Twitter that were like tagging it. Like they were excited. I mean, they're like, check me out, right? Like including one guy was a 5-star receiver. I was like, hey Ryan, you might want to follow up with this guy.
And I did.
He did. Yeah. So it is and now it's like, so kids who don't have, they're like, wait a minute, okay, where's mine? Am I going to get mine? That kind of thing. So it's a pretty cool deal, man. And again, it's also practical, right? It's part of it is, hey, we're creating buzz, right? That's when you look at it from the coaching staff, hey, we're going to create some buzz, but that buzz is serving a purpose, which is with some of these kids, we got to make a splash. Right? Like we got to really come at them in a way where it's like, hey, we're not just offering you a scholarship. We're letting the world know you're a dude, that you're a Notre Dame guy. Right. And that's the impressive thing is you really want to like, look, it's kind of like with a lot of things, your first impression, you want it to be strong. Right. And when you really come with something like this, I mean, none of these kids are necessarily like, this is the first time I've ever talked to Notre Dame. It's just this is the first time they've been able to really be engaged. And there's going to be some kids that maybe haven't had a chance to connect with staff yet. But a lot of these guys have had some sort of interaction with staff. But this is like that first real public push that, hey, you're a guy. You're not just some list of 1,000 kids that get initial, contact letters from our school. You're a guy. You're a guy that we think can help us win a championship. And it was I think it's a needle mover in a lot of ways. And we saw it. I mean, it's part of the reason I think Notre Dame has right now sitting number one in recruiting rankings for the 2023 class, because it was a similar push that they made last year with a lot of top guys. Yeah. So you've had a chance to talk with a couple guys, Ryan, just kind of give us some of the early guys that you've had a chance to kind of, connect with, and just what their thoughts were and what their reactions were to to getting obviously this push from Notre Dame.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think most of the players are kind of all over the board as far as like what their what their interactions have been with Notre Dame. I mean, the general opinion on everybody is obviously excitement from getting the offer, right? Because you're getting offered by the University of Notre Dame. It is a name brand. But I've talked to kids like Justice Chance Thompson, Colleg Coben, so I'm probably pronouncing his name incredibly wrong, but he's a very talented player as well. I've actually put on a little bit of his highlights before I got on. He's impressive. I've talked to David Stone, who is considered 4 or 5-star defensive end. In the 2024 class, Miles
He's a
Graham,
247 ranking. He's 5-star, number 21 in the country.
Yeah, so he's a big time player. Zaquan Patterson, Jeremiah Smith, like we kind of mentioned, spoke to him a little bit briefly. Sterling Dixon. I've talked to a lot of players so far, man, and I would say the consistent thing across the board is Notre Dame is making a great first impression. And an early first impression. And a couple of those guys, and it's funny that you mentioned it. Like some of them are like, yeah, I've talked to Notre Dame a bunch at this point. Other kids are like, I just started talking yesterday to them. Right. And then they give you the offer. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag as far as
because there's some limitations on how Notre Dame
Right.
can't initiate a lot of the contact with some of these kids. And some of these kids are just hard to get a hold of, or Notre Dame has just now got back from their school, their grades, their transcripts and things like that. So yeah, it's a process, but yet you're correct. I mean, and that's a great way to follow up. Like, hey, I'm so-and-so. And the next day it's like, oh, by the way, here you go. Here's your scholarship offer. Here's your pot of gold, So man, we're just kind of going over just like the composite rankings. And again, composite rankings aren't right now. We haven't watched all these kids. So we're just kind of going off of it, but it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, at least 13, just off a quick glance, 13 5-star kids that got offers that got pots of gold today, or will get a pot of gold today. We believe we'll get a pot of gold today. So it's an interesting list. I also thought the offensive line board's not real big right now in 2024. Which is kind of expected because you're going to see Coach Easton revamp that one a little bit as he kind of gets going, but a lot of balance, guys at each position. I think we'll see 4 quarterbacks get one today. There's just a lot of different things that we're going to see kind of come out today. Good running back board already, like some really quality running backs on the board already. Deep receiver class, a lot of highly ranked receivers, a lot of D linemen. So clearly Al Washington's putting in work, and a ton of DBs. I mean, that was probably the position group that had the most and will continue to get more as the day goes on of the contactors. I mean, there's a lot of DBs, including some very highly regarded DBs. So, I mean, and some guys we know about, Peyton Woodyard we know about, right? Caleb Beasley's a kid that recently got an offer. But you look at, like you said, Zaquan Patterson, it's a 5-star kid, number 19 player in the country. Emilio Agard is a 5-star kid, number 22 in the country. Antoine Jackson's a top 50 or top 30 something kid. So some really talented players got. So again, this isn't just like guys that we want to try to come camp with us this year and okay players. I mean, there's a lot of dudes on this list, Ryan.
Yeah, no, especially at defensive back, like you're saying, because I'm kind of looking at the board now. It's like Braden Lee, who I just spoke to briefly, like the last, I think 4 or 5 days, he's gotten offers from Alabama and then Notre Dame. So like, he's a kid that I think he's only rated on rivals.com right now. Like, I don't even think he's rated on like ESPN 24/7 Sports. I think none of them have him ranked, but he's going to be a kid that's going to be moving up that board pretty quickly. And one kind of observation I made, Brian, that was kind of interesting was kind of looking at the Rover board, right? Like, I feel like for the most part, we've seen a little bit of bigger body types to a degree at the Rover position. I see a lot of kids I would pencil in more as like closer to safeties than linebackers. Again, I know they're just finishing up their sophomore year, so growth will happen. But I think it's interesting that there might be I think that you're going to get kind of some mixed body types and skill sets at Rover kind of moving forward too. Like, you're not just going to see the big Sams that can also do things in space. I think you're going to see some safety length. Hybrids.
Yeah, they want length, but they don't necessarily want linebackers. Like, they want long guys can run, whether that's a safety body or a linebacker body. And I like the fact that there's certain things that they look for that they have that are must-haves to a degree. but they're willing to be open to a Jaden Osbury in 2023 who doesn't have the length you want, doesn't have the size you want, but this kid can fly and he's a great football player. So you know what? Forget all that other stuff. This kid can flat out play, right? So let's push for him. So I think you're seeing more of that. So that, yes, they have a type that they like, Ryan, to your point, but they're open to drawing from different areas. There's some guys that have linebacker bodies. There's some guys that have safety bodies. Some guys that have corner bodies that are sort of in the rover category right now that you think will fill out. So it's been very interesting, very interesting to see kind of how that goes out. So that's going to be it for this first recruiting portion, right? We're going to wrap that up. So we were able to talk about the team practice, a lot of cool stuff going on in the team practice. Ryan is going to be doing that with his phone the whole show, folks, just so you know, because he's got a lot of kids that he's been reaching out to today and a lot going on. So we appreciate you taking the time to get with us today on this. But that's going to kind of do it for the kind of recapping sort of the things that have gone on today. But don't go away just yet because we still have more coming up. And what we have coming up is our Q&A section of today's show. So we've already got some questions in there. We'll continue to kind of go through and get some more in there. But I just want people to know that, this is just anything you want to ask about Notre Dame's team, recruiting, college football, whatever. We're going to answer it here for a little bit. We're not going to probably stay as long as we have in the past because I want Ryan to get back to talking to recruits. And I think you all will understand. But here's a fun one, Ryan, to kind of start off with. This is a super chat from John. John, thank you so much. He said, here's a fun question for you guys. What is a fun fact about Notre Dame football that a lot of people won't know? History, recruiting, etc. I'm going to give one because I didn't know this for a long time. Notre Dame's first mascot for years was not the leprechaun. It was a dog. It was an Irish Terrier was their mascot for, I think the entire period of Newt Rockney's tenure, I believe. So I could be wrong on that, but I believe that is true for at least most of it, if not all of it. So that is something that I don't know how many people know that. The first mascot, it was not a leprechaun. It was a dog. It was an Irish Terrier dog. Recruiting wise, I think most people know about like Allen Iverson really thought hard about coming to play football at Notre Dame. He would have been, I think, a class ahead of Randy Moss, who had signed with Notre Dame.
It's crazy.
And James Jackson, who was also in that class as a running back. Here's one that I learned over the years that Javon Curse wanted to come to Notre Dame, but Notre Dame didn't have room. They didn't have room for him. And Vinny Serrato, for all the great things he did, turned down Tony Baselli and took another guy instead of him. So and you look and say everybody makes mistakes. But yeah, they did. Javon Curse wanted to come to Notre Dame, but he waited too long, and they didn't have a spot for him. So could you imagine Javon? I mean, you look and say, if just some of these things would have gone differently, you wonder how Lou Holtz's career would have ended with a different note. Like imagine if Ron Paulus has Derek Mays and Randy Moss to throw to and James Jackson behind him handing the ball off to. With all due respect to Autry Denson, I don't think he would have been Autry Denson if James Jackson would have come to Notre Dame instead of, because he signed with Notre Dame, but he couldn't get into school academically. Of course, we all know what happened to Randy Moss. And then if Javon Curse would have signed, with Notre Dame, and there's another one. Notre Dame didn't make a mistake here, but Notre Dame, from what I'm told from some friends of mine, and like Lou Emoji told me this, and a couple of other buddies, they were really, really close to getting Jonathan Ogden to commit to Notre Dame, but he ended up staying out west. But he was really close to leaving the West Coast and playing for Notre Dame. So that was one that I've always found very, very interesting. Very interesting.
Do you know what position Allen Iverson was going to play? If
Quarterback.
He played football.
Quarterback.
He was going to play quarterback. Definitely.
He was going to be an option quarterback. Yeah. Could you imagine that?
Yeah, because I remember. I mean, I've seen his highlights before, and he was a darn good defensive back too in high school.
Oh yeah,
crazy.
He was a super, super electric quarterback. I mean, and he was an option quarterback, and of course, at the time, Notre Dame was a triple option team. So that's what he was being recruited to play. He would have been an option quarterback, and that would have been fun to watch. That would have been really fun to watch. Yeah, so those are some interesting things. Those are some very interesting things. So Yeah. Yeah. So here we go. Garth Cassidy says, Brian, did Coach Freeman say Bellamy is playing cornerback and not safety? I didn't notice that he said that. I said he was talking about the young defensive backs, and he talked about Mickey and Bellamy together, but I didn't take that as a cornerback conversation, as more of just seeing what the defensive backs are doing. And he was like, I think that was Bellamy. He's still kind of learning the numbers, but I didn't catch that. I'll go back and listen to it again. But yeah, I didn't take that as him playing cornerback or not and not safety. From everything I've been told, even as a week ago, he was going to be playing safety, but he was a guy that would be able to cross train. So maybe they feel that there's a need there. And obviously Cam Hart is going to be out this spring, which we knew he was going to be limited. It sounds like he's going to be out for the spring. And, it's going to be very, very interesting. So let's dive into some questions here, Ryan. Thank you, everybody, for the super chats. Obviously, we always keep them going. Gideon Rosa asks, is Samuel Mpemba visiting tomorrow?
He is. Yep. He will be on campus tomorrow. If you are on the message board, we have a nice little stream in there that is titled Notre Dame Visitor List, and you'll be able to see all of the visiting players that are coming up here. There's going to be, obviously, this weekend is a big one, the 18th through the 20th. There's several really nice recruits coming in, including Malik Elzy and Braylon James, Jaden Osbury, and then there's recruit that's coming in March. We got a ton in April, and then we have the blue and gold game, which is shaping up to be a just fantastic group. So Gideon, if you are on the message board, I would go take a look at that thread. Again, it's called Notre Dame Visitor List. And if you're not, I would definitely recommend it, because there's a lot of insider info that I think you'll find very interesting in there.
John Rich says, let me see here. John says, I ordered a box of 12 assorted Built Bars. Looking forward to digging in when they arrive. Brian, Vince, and Ryan, what flavors should I open first? John, I got to pull up the website because I'm not sure what comes in the assortment box. My wife got that one time. I am not an assorted box guy. I am way too anal and way too what's a nice way to say this about myself? I'm way too much of a control freak to not even control freak. It's just I'm getting this and I'm getting this, like this whole, what you're going to get, but I want banana cream puffs. I want, this, and I'm a little weird. So let me pull this up and see what they have in here. So they have raspberry, salted caramel, cherry barcia, double chocolate, cookies and cream, coconut, mint brownie, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, churro puff, coconut puff, and banana cream pie. So some of those I haven't tried yet. So I have not tried the churro puff. I have not tried the coconut puff, although I have one. I haven't tried the coconut. My wife really likes the mint brownie. I haven't tried that yet either. The raspberry's good. I don't like raspberries, but I like the raspberry Built Bar. It's actually pretty good. So if you like raspberry, you're going to like it. The salted caramel's good. The cherry barcia is still my top 3. That is really, really good. So, John, if you're someone who wants to eat the best ones first, then eat cherry barcia early on. Eat the banana cream puff. Those are my 2 favorites of the ones that they're going to send. The double chocolate's pretty good. It's not as rich as you would think. Like, I was expecting the double chocolate to be like super rich, and it's not as rich as you'd think. My wife likes the peanut butter brownie. That one's pretty good. So those are the ones that I would say my mom, I've only had one salted caramel, and I remember liking it, but it was like really early on. I think it might have been the first Built Bar I had, but my mom loves the salted caramel, and that's one that's going to be in there too. So you're going to get a chance to get those. And I'm really excited to try the Rocky Road that they had this special on. They're out now. And then I'm really curious to see when they're going to, like, this is the thing. It's like, we got to be careful. So like, if you're part of the ambassador program, they send you these flavors to try, but some of them you're allowed to talk about and some of them you're not. So I'm not sure. There's one that I'm really excited about that I'm hoping that they're going to release soon. Cause if I'm just, you can't like send me one and then it's phenomenal. And then like, oh, I can't go order more. That's just mean. That's very, very mean. And if you don't know what we're talking about, Built Bar is a phenomenal protein bar. I know Ryan loves them. Genuinely, we're not just saying that to pump a product. I mean, he genuinely loves them. I love them. And you can get a link down below. We actually have a relationship with Built Bar where if you order Built Bars and you use the promo code Irish Breakdown, all one word, you get 10% off your entire purchase, and you can use that anytime you want. I was going to try the Shamrock today because I figured, it's March 17th. I'm going to try the Shamrock. I'm going to tell everybody about it if it was good or not. And I went and looked at it, and it was a wrapper because my wife crushed it. So she's like, well, you can tell everybody it's really good. You can push it. It was really good, but I couldn't tell you if it was really good because my wife punished it. So I didn't get a chance to try the Shamrock one, but she said it was really good. She's in a meeting right now, so I have to ask her when she's done kind of like what the flavor was like. But I was like, yeah, I'm going to have the Shamrock one. It's, St. Patrick's Day. Well, apparently my wife had the same idea, and she got to it first. So I'm not going to say anything about that. There you go. Timeout Tom asks, does the NCAA limit the amount of coaches a team can have? As far as on-field coaches and graduate assistants, yes. You can only have one head coach, 10 assistant coaches, and you can have four graduate assistants, I believe. Where there is no limit as of right now is the number of analysts. But analysts can be on the field, but they can't instruct. So the NCAA limits the number of people that can instruct players during practice. They can instruct in other times, but they can't instruct during practice. And so it's technically 11 full-time coaches and I believe 4 graduate assistants. Gideon Rosa asked, did Tyler Buckner's ball angles look kind of odd? His throws come out with a lot of pop as quick release. I didn't think they came out odd. I mean, he throws low, so it's going to come out different than a guy that throws over top. But I didn't notice it being an issue. Dan Arcuri, will Jerome Bettis be used to talk to recruits when they visit campus? The bus talking to Dante would make sense since they both came from Detroit. I wouldn't tell you to not assume that he hasn't already had that conversation with Dante, Ryan. So I think Jerome Bettis has definitely been, because here's the thing, because he's a student, you can have him more engaged than you can a normal alum, which is kind of unique. There aren't a whole lot of people that have Hall of Famers enrolled in class right now. So I would imagine, and young kids know who Jerome Bettis is. I mean, their parents definitely do. But even now, if you watch the Super Bowl, he was on a commercial with Eli and Peyton Manning. You know what I mean? You know who the bus is.
Can you imagine going to a classroom and Jerome Bettis is your classmate?
No, I can't. I can't. No, I couldn't imagine that. I'd be like, how am I supposed to concentrate right now? How am I supposed to focus? It's the bus. Right. So let's get to some more questions here. Looking forward to seeing how the linebackers shape up. Why Jordan Patel at Rover? He doesn't seem like a fit there. Thanks, super stoked. I think it's just he's a rangy guy. He can help against the perimeter runs, and he can also blitz from there. They don't ask him to do a ton in coverage except curl stuff, but it's also just about there aren't great numbers there. That's a big part of it. So here we go. Ryan, I'm going to ask you this one. Quinn Kibler says, question for later. What player would you put in the Nathan's hot dog eating contest? I'm going Blake Fisher.
Blake's a good one. Rocco Spindler comes to mind. I think my pick, though, it might be a little bit of a wild card here. I might go with Gabriel Rubio. He looks like he can put some stuff away, man. He's a bull strong kid. He's a huge kid. And I don't know. For whatever reason, he's just one guy that popped in my head that's like, I bet that guy could do pretty well in a hot dog eating contest.
But do you ever notice who wins all these hot dog eating contests? It's never big dudes.
Small players. Yeah.
Yeah, small guys. It's like little guys, right? And so, I'd have to think about like what guy on the team.
So it's the kicker that the grad transfer, right?
Quinn Kibler? No, he might be a little too small. That kid, I might cause irreparable damage if that kid tried to pound too many hot dogs.
What's it? Blake Groupie. That's my pick.
Yeah, Blake Groupie. I'm gonna have to think about that one. I'd probably have to it's gonna be somebody that's like super active and burns calories real fast. I'm like Drew Pine. I'm going Drew Pine. I'm gonna go with the outside the box thought process. I'm gonna go Drew Pine. That's why he's got all that energy. His metabolism runs like super, super fast. That's what I'm gonna go with. There you go. That's what I'm gonna go with. All right, let's get down to see here. Coleman Smith said, not on the message board to read about it, but how did Carnell Tate's visit go? Coleman, I would encourage you to jump on the message board. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, but some of this stuff is going to always be premium content, so we need to have some stuff that we just don't hand out for free. That's how we can run a business, right? Ryan and I had a conversation about that today. So, we got to have a business to run. And so I'm sorry, some of that stuff is just going to be on there, but the visit went really well. That's what we'll say. The visit went really well, and Notre Dame certainly left a strong impression. What happens next remains to be seen, but they definitely put themselves in a position. John Rich says, wondered this for a while. When a recruit visits, I see them in all kinds of gear. What gear do they get to leave with? Do you know the answer to that, Ryan? I don't know if I know the answer to that. I don't know if there is things that they can take with them. That's something. I mean, it's obviously an official and an unofficial are going to be different.
Yeah,
but
I always
I'm
just
not
kind of
quite
assumed
sure.
that it was. I always assumed that it was just kind of for the visit, and then it didn't leave. But I could be completely wrong about that. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah.
Now.
I am not quite sure the answer to that question, to be completely honest with you. I'm going to go through here and try to find some more questions here. I got a couple here. Gideon Rosa says, was it just me or did Chris Tyree look even better now than he did a few months ago? Well, I would hope so. I mean, that's what the winter program's all about. But yeah, you're right. He's filled out and it looked like good weight. He's definitely getting stronger. I mean, he's hitting that age where you're going to see him start to kind of add that. He's a junior now. So you're going to see those kind of things. But yeah, he looked good. And this is again another reason you want to. And Gideon, you were now on the message board, but we had that. I mean, what was it we said earlier? Like we were told in the intel piece, he had a monster winner, and we're seeing it because that's something you kind of look for when you talk to source and they say, this guy did this guy did that, and you want to get out there and see it, and then you kind of like, okay, this dude's lying to me because that kid looks like he did nothing but eat hot dogs all winter. You know what I mean? Like he gained 10 pounds, was all in his stomach. You want to see things when they say, hey, this guy's had a great offseason. You want to kind of see those things show up. And so, I mean, from what we saw today, those things certainly did. Tyler Longbreak says, I'm rooting for Jaden Thomas. He just looks like one of those receivers that can develop into a stud. I don't know about stud, but I think he can help. I think he'd be a good complementary player, like a number 2, number 3 kind of guy for Notre Dame, Jaden Thomas. And then Keith Wiegand, what was that Xavier Watts' decision to stay on defense or a team decision? I mean, I think both sides of the ball wanted Xavier. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be up to him. And I mean, you've got to give a kid a chance to kind of play where he wants, especially as much as they've moved him around. You don't want to keep jerking with that kid. You let him decide where he's going to play. Got a recruiting question from Keith as well. Is Devin Houston a take if Notre Dame gets Jason Moore and Boubacar Traore while keeping Keeley and Vernon? It's not necessarily an easy answer. It's
not.
They would like to take him, right, Ryan? It's just, can you make the numbers work? That's really what it comes down to.
I would like to think in an ideal situation because, I mean, so obviously in this scenario, you're projecting Moore and Traore as the interior players, right? And they are very different players than Devin Houston, right? Like, I think Devin's a true, he's going to be a one-gapping type of nose. Like, that's what his style is, in my opinion, long-term. So I think the fit can make sense, Keith. But like Brian said, I think it really depends on what the take numbers are at a couple other positions if you are able to take that 5th defensive lineman. I think they would like to, but I think that remains to be seen a little bit as it kind of fills out at defensive line.
I know that there's people that really want to take 5. And I actually kind of support that. I think the reason I say that is, Ryan, is you're not going to have this many top-ranked guys in pro. I mean, think about it. If they were to get all 5 of those guys, right?
Sure.
So the 2 that are committed already, Boubacar, Jason Moore, and Devin Houston. And Jason Moore's my number 3. I mean, he's my, of the 3 uncommitted guys, he's my number 1.
Sure.
Right. But I'd take all of them. Jason, they're all except for Keon Keeley from above the Mason-Dixon line. And they're all highly ranked guys from above the Mason-Dixon line. You're just, again, this is one of those unique years in this 2023 class. We have to be honest about it. Like, I don't know if they can replicate this in 2024, meaning just like this, it could still be a great class, but like number 1 great class. I don't know because I don't know if there's going to be as many elite Northern kids next year. And that's what Notre Dame's trying to take advantage of. I mean, you've got Brennan Vernon's from Ohio. Boubacar is from Massachusetts, right? I mean, that's where he's at school now. I don't know if he's necessarily originally from there. I believe he goes to I think that's probably what makes it difficult, like Massachusetts and Connecticut, is there's like a lot of boarding schools where kids aren't necessarily from there. I think Jersey has some, but like most of the really good Jersey schools, most of them are like St. Peter's. They're like, I mean, their kids live somewhat within that region, right?
Right.
I think Hun is a boarding school. Am I correct on that?
Hun School, yeah. I think Hun School is, yeah.
And then there's a lot of those in Massachusetts and Connecticut. So just because a kid is going to that school in Massachusetts doesn't necessarily mean he's from Massachusetts, but he's still there. I mean, he's playing in the cold and all those type of things. But and then obviously Jason Moore's from the Maryland, D.C. area, and like I said, Devin Houston is from the Maryland, D.C. area as well. So I think you take advantage, and it's big, long kids. Like that's the other thing is you're going to greatly increase your size and length with this group if you're able to bring in all 5. So I just look at the makeup of the current roster and kind of what's coming down the pike and say, if you got a chance to load up in this class, you figure out a way to load up in this class. I think that's an absolute must in my opinion, Ryan.
Isn't it crazy that the smallest defensive lineman we just talked about is 6'4"? That's the smallest.
Yeah.
One, man.
So the smallest guy would be what, 6'4"? I mean,
like 6'4" even, right?
6'4" even, yeah. And then the Keon at 230 is the lightest.
Right. Even
after that, the next lightest is 250, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's some
or
big
255, right? Because we're told Traore's a little closer to like 254, 255 than 250.
Because Vernon's 250 plus.
Oh, easy. I
mean, he's listed at 250, but he looks bigger. He's looking like he's filled out.
He's massive.
Jason Moore's listed, according to Notre Dame, is 260.
Yep.
Devin Houston's 280, 275, 280. I saw one site list him at 270. I was like, there's no way in the heck that kid only weighs 270 pounds.
No.
There's no way. He weighs like $130 in each leg. I mean, that's
I know.
A big kid.
I was about to say, if he's less than like 282, I would find it very shocking, to be honest.
Yes.
He's a massive kid.
Yes. That's a big boy. He is definitely a big boy. So we've got a couple more that popped up here. A couple more questions that popped up here. Here's an interesting one. Happy Thursday, IB. Wonder what your thoughts on Coach Freeman's comments on being a team, not just an offense or defense. I loved it.
Yeah,
I did. I thought that there was there's always seemed to be, like you said in the past, 2 teams. And Brian Kelly was always focused on the offense, and he just kind of left the defense alone. And then just the way he would talk about the units, and it was always like it was a different team. And I'll tell you, there was some adversarialness to how those 2 teams viewed each other. I'm just tell you that right now. And so when one side of the unit wasn't holding their end up, their end of the bargain up in a game or in a practice, it would create tension and conflict. Like, we're doing our thing. Why aren't you doing yours? Because that's kind of how the program was built. It was just not the same team. I think Coach Freeman is making a concerted effort to be like, we got to build on each other. We got to build off each other, right? Like we've got to say, hey, look, we got to pick you up. You got to pick us up. We're going to pick you up next time. You got to have our back. And to where when the offense does something good, it fires up the defense and vice versa. And when the other team, and when that happens, then when the offense makes a mistake, the defense says like, hey, we got you. Or when the defense gives up a play, gives up a score, like, don't sweat it. We got you, right? It's that having your back mentality, but it's also about holding each other accountable more. So if one side of the ball is playing really well, you kind of say, hey, look, that's going to make you better. Right? And we've talked about that, right? Like, and he emphasized that today too. He was like, we haven't had any fights today. And he's like, he made the point to say, I've been on staffs before where they were like, we got to get them to fight. And he's like, that's not who we are. And I think that is exactly because you're not trying to make an offense versus a defense. You're trying to make one team. And when you're battling in practice, you're battling to make each other better, because that's how we're going to go out and win a championship. And it was not a coincidence that a day before spring practice started, they released that video that began with Marcus Freeman after the bowl game saying, remember this feeling in your stomach right now. Remember how much you hate how you feel right now. And let's work to never feel that way again. And then it's just all these players talking about championship. And that's how he believes you get there, is by you're gonna hit each other, you're gonna pound on each other, you're gonna compete, you're gonna battle, but it's all meant to where we're all working toward the same goal as a team. And not the offense has carried this or the defense has carried that or whatever else the case may be. So I like it. It's kind of how I view it. I don't think that, beating each other up and having that mentality is really something that you do. I understand the merit behind Oklahoma drills because it's about seeing toughness and all that kind of stuff. But I never understood the whole, coach. And I had some old school coach like that. Fights like, you break it up, but then you're like, yeah, I'm glad we had that fight today. I hated that crap. It's like somebody's going to do something stupid. I don't want my receivers breaking his hand because he punches someone in the helmet. That's the kind of stupid thing kids do when they get in fights is they punch each other's helmets. Just dumb.
Doesn't make any sense. Never does.
But
Never does.
it just I've never liked that when you have those fights and people that support that. And it was interesting that Freeman brought that up on his own. Like he wasn't even asked about fights. Was there any fights today? Like, but I just think it comes down to that. Hey, we're going to be a team, and I'm going to be over there with Coach Reese in meetings, not to tell him what to do, but to learn. I don't know if that's true or not, but like it's like, hey, I got your back. You need to have mine kind of mentality, and I think that's good. Coleman Smith, I'm worried about Keon Keeley now that he set up a visit to Ohio State. Ryan, you want to respond to that?
Sure, I'm not. I'm not worried about Ohio State. If there's any region that I'd be worried about Keon Keeley potentially leaving for staying in, it's down south, right? Like I'm not worried about him choosing a different northern school. I'm not. We knew that this was going to happen. We knew Keon Keeley was going to take visits. I am not worried about Ohio State into this recruitment. Again, if there's a place that maybe is a different conversation, he visit Alabama. I'm not really worried about that either. But the University of Florida, obviously down there is, right, very pertinent to his hometown, right? So those are the only schools that like maybe gives you a sense of pause for a split second. But either way, I'm still not worried about Keon Keeley, guys. Like I'm just not. I'm not worried about him. I'm not. There's other things that maybe are a little more worrisome. I'm not worried about Keon Keeley leaving, especially not for Ohio State.
Yeah, look, Keon's been up front for a while. He wants to take visits. And I mean, you have to have enough confidence in yourself as a program that you're okay, and just keep reminding him why he picked Notre Dame in the first place. So Ohio State's been on him trying to work this out for a while. So like I said, I think the school that could get him is Florida or Bama. He's not going to Ohio State in my opinion. I don't see that. I don't see that at all. JKR Myers with a super chat. Thank you for that, JKR Myers. Given Buckner and the running backs, shouldn't we add more wrinkles in the run game next season? Call up the wishbone, maybe. Keep up the great work. I mean, I always like wrinkles, but I don't think wrinkles need to be too complex. I think, one thing when Coach Easton had those great offensive lines, Ryan, there was not a lot of wrinkles. It was, we're going to run inside zone, we're going to outside zone, we're going to run counter, we're going to run buck sweep. Like that's who we are. The wrinkles come from in this game, we're going to run this out of 12 personnel because we're going to start off in twins. We're going to motion this, and then we're going to do a motion here because that's going to get them to react this way, which gives us the leverage we need to run this particular play this way. I think sometimes when you get too cute in the run game, your guys don't necessarily have a great idea of what to do. I'm like, look, if you got the right players, run your stuff. I mean, you don't need more than 7 or 8 run concepts at the most, in my opinion. Inside zone, outside zone. You need something off tackle. You need a misdirection. I like the buck sweep. I mean, you don't need a ton of stuff. Maybe you want to throw a mid zone in there, maybe a G wrap or something in there. Maybe a power O and short yardage, something, a wedge or something. I mean, you don't need a ton of stuff. Be real multiple and diverse with how you run it, meaning, maybe one time it's pistol, the next time it's gun, 12, 13, 11, 10, 20, whatever. Have some reads off of those type of things. Run, I think, because I think partly too, RPOs have given you a lot of wrinkles where you don't have to necessarily change your run aspect, but because sometimes when I was younger, we would spend so much time like, man, how do we block this guy? How we got to figure out a way to block this overhang guy. Well, with RPOs, you don't have to block that guy anymore. You just read off of him and throw off of him. So JKR, I don't really think they need a lot of more wrinkles. I think they need to be great at what they believe in. Be great at the zone. Be great inside zone and outside zone. Be great at your counters. Be great at the buck sweep. Be great at the different aspects of the run game that you think you need to major in. And then the wrinkles come from formations, alignments, and things like that. I think that's where you can kind of get creative with some of the stuff that you want to do there. And then Bruce Scherer says, in regards to 24 prospects, does Notre Dame offer first and then in the future check their academics? Sometimes, but not often. Notre Dame's back office has been putting in a lot of work on the 2024 kids. Then they've got a ton of transcripts already. They've made calls. They've talked to coaches, guidance counselors, principals, all that kind of stuff on some of these kids. So, I mean, there's kids that they've got to learn more about. There's probably still some kids that they're trying to get information on. But for the most part, the staff does a really nice job of getting an idea. Now, somebody said, I don't think we offer without checking academics. That's not necessarily true. Sometimes you need to throw an offer out to get in the game with a kid, And so you throw the offer out and you just let them know, like, look, we got to make sure that your academics check out, but, you know, we're going to throw you this offer. And as long as things check out, you know, this is going to be fine. Right. And, you know, the offer will stand. So, you know, I kind of think that's really where I think that Notre Dame tends to stand. So they have a good idea. And when they normally don't have a good idea, they're usually pretty upfront with the kid and saying, hey, listen, you know, we're going to offer you right now because we love you, but there's some things we got to figure out first. And I think that's kind of where they are. So I believe that is going to do it for today's show. I think that's most of the questions that we were able to get to here for the show. If we missed any, I apologize, but I got to let this guy go because as you guys can see, he's constantly on his phone, you know, kind of getting updates and different things. And he's reached out to a ton of kids today. So I appreciate you, Ryan, taking the time to come join us for the show. And I'm going to go ahead and let you get back to work. Before you leave, everybody, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. And if you want to keep talking about practice, if you have more questions, if you want to find more out about recruiting, join the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. You will not regret it. I promise you. So definitely be a part of that. And check out the Built Bar, the merch store, all that good stuff. But make sure that you're back with us tomorrow at 12:30 for our Friday free-for-all, our Notre Dame football mailbag on Friday. So looking forward to that. So for Ryan and Vince, I'm Brian. Everybody, you all have a great rest of your day. And thank you so much for joining the Irish Breakdown podcast.